Okay, here we are into my book on page 92. Continuing with the fifth and final chapter, Spiritual Praxis. The possibility of praxial spirituality. Spirituality can be hard to define. Perhaps it should be hard to define, paradoxical even. Rather than define it, I am aiming for an understanding of spirituality as praxis. To the non-music educator, that music education is linked to spirituality and religion can seem obvious. Music is part of most religious activities and has been since before written history. Sadis Coleman in 1928 speculates, in the early ages of the human race, when primitive man first evoked a vibrant sound from a stone, it must have seemed to him the voice of his God speaking the mysterious language of Mother Earth. For was not stone a part of the sacred underworld? Was not the tree also attached to Mother Earth in a mysterious way? And would not the peculiar sound of hardwood, when struck, seem to have some hidden power attached to it? The strangeness of these sounds led primitive man to invest them with a sacred character. To his thinking, everything which he could not understand was something to be worshipped, and the sound of stricken metal and hollow wood must have conveyed to him much that was supernatural. His God spoke to him in a crash of thunder and in all other vibrant and mysterious sounds. End quote. Music and ritual are interconnected, and music educators can clarify those connections. In music education research on spirituality, interconnections go beyond connecting music and ritual to relationships between individuals and communities. The natural world, cosmos, and the divine. And that's from Vander Merwe and Habron. I think I hacked the pronunciation of that name. Okay, going on. Spirituality and music education can be understood as a drive to explore the shared realm of human experience. Thus, to live the good life as a music teacher is, for many people, understanding spiritual aims. Jorgensen discusses spiritual values within the context of the Gaia hypothesis. This view emphasizes stewardship of nature, living in harmony with the environment, care, cooperation, recognizing interconnections with others, and emphasis of process over product. Spirituality in music education means looking for that which connects us to one another. In philosophy of music education on soil, us is understood more broadly than only humans. June Boyce Tillman raises critical questions when encouraging a spiritual praxis of music education. Quote, is the aesthetic spiritual a contemporary version of the religious? Is there a notion of a spiritual dimension that can be freed from a particular religious tradition? End quote. Though many music education scholars approach spiritual issues from the point of view of aesthetics, the current philosophy of music education on soil separates the aesthetic from the spiritual because, in music education at least, aesthetics theorists seem to scientize, see scientism above, spirituality when spiritual aspects of musicking come under the purview. I recommend a spiritual praxis of music education. A praxial approach to doing spirituality may be unable and may not desire to separate spirituality from religion, and alternatively not religion, because the people intending spirituality through musicking have religious and or non-religious aims. For some people, spiritual actions are religious, and for others they're not. For a music teacher, understanding his/her deepest motivation for choosing the ethical work, separating spirit and religion may be impractical. The way people intend musicking ritual can be an excellent way to illuminate spiritual praxis. Some spirituality in music education scholars frame their work within the context of aesthetics. Aesthetic education focuses on perceiving works of art often described using cognitive psychology and secondarily culture. So, according to Knieder in 1971, since man learns from experience and since music is part of his experience, he has naturally developed, consciously or unconsciously, some degree of comprehension in musical matters. For the aesthetic experience to take place, the respondent cannot simply bathe in the emotional waters. The respondent is acutely conscious while effectively engaged. The intellectual awareness is usually manifested in one or more of the typical cognitive processes: analysis, synthesis, abstraction, generalization, evaluation. End quote. Aesthetic educators aim to cultivate aesthetic sensitivity. However, the scientific activities, analysis, synthesis, abstraction, generalization, evaluation, approached scientism, reducing and qualifying non-scientific experience. In this case, spirituality experienced by musicers, to scientific scrutiny, to attempt to understand spirituality or any other cultural practice. By beginning with an individual's response to a work of art, and within the terminology of cognitive science, misses something important of what spiritual actually is. A Catholic nun meditating as she sings her Kyrie, or a Buddhist monk chanting to take refuge in the three jewels, intends far more than mere cognitive benefits. An analysis of the work of art misses the point of the practice. The pitch relations, form, and other musical elements might be simple, but the intention complex. In this case, all of the critiques of music education as aesthetic education by praxialists are appropriate to the current philosophy of music education on soil. As Rogalski says, aesthetic rationales are simply not needed in order to account for the moving power of music and art. Rogalski goes further by suggesting aesthetic theorists value what I refer to as spiritual music less, ignoring the social praxis of these musics. Quote, because music is held by aesthetic theorists to be autonomous and in the mind, not the body, and for its own sake, attention is directed to the internal relations or expressive properties or the work, rather than any extra musical connections external to it that support the performance or use. Thus, the connection value of music with praxis, i.e. in terms of music's social purposes or values, for example, with music as worship, celebration, ceremony, and so forth, either disqualifies it as properly aesthetic or considerably lowers its value on the tacit aesthetic hierarchy, depending on the theorists. End quote. The sonic structural simplicity of spiritual expressions, such as the Kyrie or the three jewels, lowers its value in aesthetic scrutiny. But music can be simple from an aesthetic point of view, but have great spiritual value. Scholars theorizing in music education who might not identify as praxialists, like Boyce Tillman, help realize and modify praxial theory by identifying how it connects the body, mind, and spirit of musical experience. A praxial approach to spirituality and music education on soil is employed, and aesthetic concerns can be understood as within, but cannot subsume the broader spiritual praxis. In other words, while aesthetic rationales are simply not needed, an individual's aesthetic experience can be a part of a spiritual praxis for many musicers. But if spirituality is about connecting to God, goddess, goddesses, gods, however conceived, others, and nature, the individual's aesthetic experience is only a part of spirituality. What matters is what musicers intend, what they enact, and what they experience. This praxis is essentially social and plural, just as the self connects, extends, and includes. Sentence 2. Musicers' music for spiritual aims. Toward an eco-theology. Though, in the U.S. at least, Christianity and environmentalism seem at odds, Christianity is filled with ecological teachings. Critical of modern society, Christians recognize, according to Leonardo Boff, Our times are agitated and violent and threaten the future of humankind and of our shared home, the earth. End quote. Conversion, central to Christian thought, is more than saying I believe. Conversion is lived daily as critical conversation with society in the world. Conversion and conversation share Latin roots. Con, with together. Verse, turning. Christians are those who unceasingly ask critical questions of society in which they live, and who continuously stress the necessity of conversion, not only for the individual but also for the world. The relationship between people and the environment is stewardship. The responsible care of property belonging to another. In belonging together, humans converse with each other and with non-human life. We change together. We convert. Look, the heavens, even the highest heavens, belong to the Lord, your God, as well as the earth and everything on it. That's Deuteronomy 10:14. For Barry, stewardship challenges our current economic system. Quote, large accumulations of land were and are forbidden because the dispossession and privation of some cannot be an acceptable or normal result of the economic activity of others, for that destroys a people. As a people, it destroys the community. End quote. Christians are called to convert, to become ecologically conscious stewards, aware of society's unjust domination of people and our environment. Correspondingly, Christianity and anarchism seem at odds. However, according to Christian anarchists, biblical thought leads straight to anarchism. Anarchism is the only anti-political position in harmony with Christian thought, and that's Jacques Ellul. Anarchists have been anti-religion to the extent that God has been conceptualized as power. God is master, humans as slaves, and Christianity as seeking order above freedom. Constructing a biblical argument, Jacques Ellul challenges institutionalized Christianity as antithetical to the God of the Bible, where Jesus chooses the way of radical nonviolence, and love is the only definition of God in the Bible. This position of nonviolent action and skepticism towards institution provides agents, doers, with a biblically rooted foundation for acting and judging actions. Ellul continues, quote, as the institutionalization of the church hardens, so does its dogmatism. Truth considered as a possession, in which case it ceases to be truth, leads to judgment and condemnation. Love, when institutionalized, produces authority and hierarchy. End quote. Christian anarchists identify the institutionalization of values such as love historically. For Illich, schools exemplify the negative consequences of institutionalization of love in an industrial society. Quote, schools serve as an effective creator and sustainer of social myth. Academic priests mediate between the faithful and the gods of privilege and power, a ritual of expiation which sacrifices its dropouts, branding them as scapegoats of underdevelopment. End quote. When I act as a human, I tend to act in a morally good way. But when I act as a representative of an institution, a teacher, I too often feel the responsibility of reifying school's primary value, scarcity. As a teacher, I construct objectives, order how students should learn. I grade students A, B, C, D, or F. If I give all of my students A's, I feel I have failed my institution in some way. Not everybody can be an A music or math or reading student. In societies without school music, no students are A music students, but they also aren't F music students. They may not even be students, but simple, beautiful, learning, acting musicers. Despite knowing the damage it does to people and to musical cultures, I have labeled students as non-musicians, and they have become dropouts, dropping out of school music. I have had university students identifying themselves as non-musicians. Even students who perform as musicians without training. Cultures without music education institutions do not reify musician scarcity to the same degree, if at all. In human history, the vast majority of people have been musicians without music education. But the argument for music in schools becomes one of equal access of a modern culture that doesn't view music as important. But even in this modern culture, these non-musicians develop quite a bit of effort to experiencing musics. Fromm recommends spontaneity to counteract institutionalization of scarcity in schools. Positive freedom consists in the spontaneous activities of the total integrated personality. Music educators can begin with skepticism towards their institutions and incorporate activities that nurture student spontaneity, because these creative activities empower the students as individuals and community members rather than as subjects of institutions. For instance, schools, government, industry testing, the National Association for Music Education, the Mayday Group. Fromm also suggests spontaneous activity aids in self-cultivation, connecting people to themselves and nature. For music teachers and music teacher educators, we can say the university music teacher educators do not prioritize these activities. Music teachers can experience a tension between creative pedagogy and long-held repertoire-based concepts of success. That, with more instruction, music teachers would include creative pedagogies, but the lack of creative musicianship could be a barrier, as could gender. Fromm's insights extends what we know about creative pedagogy to the realm of self-cultivation. Again, there were a lot of references in there, so maybe check out the book in the reference section. Incorporating opportunities for spontaneous pedagogy can be central to teaching for self-cultivation and connection to nature. For it is spontaneous realization of the self man unites himself anew with the world, with man, nature, and himself. End quote from 1969. This is in line with my historical research into the spiritual philosophy of Satis Coleman, which integrated creativity, singing, and world music pedagogy, and spiritual aims such as living simply and wholesome humility, and with Han's Buddhist spirituality. These were integrated aspects of a holistic spiritual philosophy for music education. Sentence 3. Musicers creatively music for spiritual aims. With a Christian anarchist concept of what we can term spirituality portrayed, and some implications for music education clarified, I pivot to the traditional Catholic eco-theology. St. Francis of Assisi, St. Hildegard von Bingen, Teilhard de Chardin, and Thomas Merton contribute to ecological dialogue. Though Catholics are not prone to think of these and other significant contributors from Catholicism as being particularly ecological, as Pope Francis's recent encyclical, quoted in the opening chapter, illustrates, Catholic eco-theology connects social and ecological concerns. This includes the physical and the spiritual, as well as the human dimensions of reality. Catholic eco-theology can be understood as being rooted in the Bible. Jesus meditated in the desert wilderness before beginning his mission. Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert. And poverty, a virtue emphasized in Catholic teaching, is a virtue out of line with our current society. According to St. Hildegard of Bingen, no one is able to be satisfied by abundance. You are only bored by it. Pope Benedict VI taught safeguarding the environment is imperative. Quote, protecting the natural environment in order to build a world of peace is thus a duty incumbent upon each and all. White identified St. Francis of Assisi as the greatest spiritual revolutionary in Western history, and it is probably no coincidence that the current Pope has chosen Francis as his namesake. With the publication of Laudato Si in 2015, Catholic eco-theology was further validated. Pope Francis draws on St. Francis's Canticle of the Sun. He discusses pollution, climate change, water security, loss of biodiversity, societal issues such as quality of life, inequality, and weak responses, recommending an integral approach that considers ecological and social issues simultaneously. He identified education as central to solving the ecological crisis. There is a nobility in the duty to care for creation through little daily actions, and it is wonderful how education can bring about real change in lifestyle. Within the educational theology, music might have a central role. Quote, if someone has not learned to stop and admire something beautiful, we should not be surprised if he or she treats everything as an object to be used and abused without scruple. If we want to bring about deep change, we need to realize that certain mindsets really do influence our behavior. End quote. Drawing on Terre de Chardin, Thomas Berry began writing about ecological issues in the 1970s, and he's connected to the deep ecology movement. See Chapter 4, Deep Ecology. He founded the Thomas Berry Association with the aims of enhancing the flourishing of the Earth community. Berry theorized a great work, creating one of the overarching movements that gives shape and meaning to the life by relating the human venture to the larger destinies of the universe. Berry's work provides a broad spiritual praxis for understanding the cosmos as evolving creation and acting for change. Sentence 4. Musicers creatively music for spiritual aims out of a sense of duty toward people and creation. We'll stop there. We'll pick up back on page 99. Some interesting sections in this, right? Starts off with a critique of aesthetics that seems warranted from Rogalski, diving into some actual aesthetic thoughts on it, which seems to dissolve spirituality into psychology. Right, then it continues into Catholic eco-theology, which has been more and more my path in recent years. A real biblical eco-theology. Have a great day.